This podcast is sponsored by Worldwide Sires Australia. Worldwide Sires Australia will celebrate its 10-year anniversary at IDW 2024 as a wholly owned business of the Worldwide Sires and Select Sires family, owned by farmers for farmers. International Dairy Week presents Around the Barn. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Treloar, and this will be the online space where those in the Australian dairy industry can connect with each other, as well as those right around the world in the lead up to Australia's premier dairy show in January. This will be the one-stop shop where you can catch up with our sponsors, exhibitors and judges to talk all things cows, technology and showing down under. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Around the Barn for 2023. We are so excited to have you back. We've got so much in store for you this season when we officially launch in a few weeks' time. But we have a very, very special episode to launch, of course, and that is following the announcement of the Holstein Judge for International Dairy Week, none other than Barclay Phoenix, all the way from the other side of the world. Barclay, welcome to the podcast. Look, for those that don't know you or aren't familiar, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Casey. Barclay Phoenix from Greenbank, Ontario, Canada, and merchandise and small elite cattle here, and have my father had a stroke in 2017, and I took over the beef cow operation there too, and then I guess it was in January of 2020 that I started working for Select Sires as a dairy consultant, and it's a great balance between that, judging some shows, and of course we're always busy around the farm here. So.
Now, Barclay, our relationship goes back quite some time. I was working it out this morning here in Australia that it was back in 2010. We did some business together at a cow called Greenlee Advent Cara. And one of my special memories from that cow and opportunities, I think it was when I visited there in Canada and you took me to Hanover Hill Holsteins. I think it's something that I treasure a lot from, I was only 20 years old, right? So I was a young pup, but it was a very special memory for me and I'll never forget it and always be grateful for that opportunity. So maybe just start with, if we can start with a little bit of obviously your mentorship, and I would love to sort of work through the backstory of what those times look like, because we are the younger generation, and we didn't have the privilege of sort of knowing Peter or working with Peter. So love to get you a little bit of that backstory, how that time was, and what that meant to you as well.
Yeah, Declan. It's funny how it all worked out. You try to work at home with your parents and your fathers and your family, and it doesn't always work out. It's probably, if any advice to any young person that wanted to go home, work on the farm, is to get a job off the farm, learn from somebody else, because when you get back home, you realize maybe it's not as bad as you thought it was. But I guess it was, it was probably 1997 when I started going to Hanover Hill, clipping heifers. They didn't have a milking herd at that time. And then, and didn't really know Peter that well, but got to know him and got to, let him know some of the ideas that I had and what my goals maybe were. And he really admired young people that had passion for the industry. And, I think it was about a year later, we decided that maybe we'd start milking a few cows there, and it flourished into, I think a couple of years later, there was a whole barn full of cows, and Hanover Hill was back showing again. And I believe it was in maybe 1998 that we took a string of homebred cattle to Madison, and I think I was the oldest, and I might have been 20 years old. So, and we milked those cows 3 times a day, and there was a lot of pressure on us. We're working for Hanover Hill and Peter Heffring, and I remember Peter coming in the night before and, hope you're gonna have these cows bagged right for morning. It actually turned out pretty good. We had a Mandel. Lulu was her name. She went on to be a pretty good brood cow with Carousel. I believe it was Moorfields bought her in the dispersal. And she was 6, award winner, and we had mascot Roxy, who was a beautiful open rib cow with a clean bone and deep seam, and I believe she might have got nominated All-American 5-year-old that year. And then she had an inspiration sister, I believe, Roxy Russ, and they were, I believe, All-American produce that year. So it was pretty cool. And as things sometimes happen, I would think that probably I was going to stay there for forever. And unfortunately, I had broke my leg in December of that year. And I was in a cast for about 8 months, and Peter decided he was going to have a dispersal just because he didn't think that, things were going to end up the way it was. And so they had a dispersal, and I unfortunately wasn't part of the dispersal, but we decided that we were going to have a tag sale across the road from Hanover Hill. And I remember Peter David Younger telling me, "The hell's a goddamn tag sale?" I said, we're going to put some cattle together in a barn and have pedigrees, but there won't be any auction. It's just, private treaty, and the people that want them can ask the price. And if they decide on the price, then, anyways, after the sale, their dispersal was the same time as the Alta sale. So there was a 2-day sale, and the barn that we had across Brent Howe and I, by the time you finished parking your cars, it was closer to go to our sale than it was to walk way up across the farm to the tent. So it was a great experience for all of us. I remember Peter and David Younger coming down, and I thought it was a neat idea at the time. And I think we ended up selling a couple All-Americans out of there that as heifers, and I know Pierre Boulet bought a couple pretty good cows out of that, and it kind of correlated what tag sales were. And I remember my relationship with Peter stayed great. He was like a grandfather to my kids and up until his death, and he was always interested in what was going on in the industry, that's for sure. So
Barclay, I guess a more recent time that I guess everyone is probably familiar with is the story of a particular red cow called Maple. You were the man that steered the ship for her in the ring. What was that like to be a part of that story and that journey for a cow that will probably forever be etched in history?
Yeah. Well, I guess it all started, my son Keaton was working with Kevin Dobriner and that crew at Madison, and I kind of like looking back in history a little bit and see who the people are that used to be in the business, maybe went away from it a little bit, but then somewhat come back to it.
Yeah.
I'd say like Randy Fraser, for instance, or the Butlers. They've were away there for a bit and come back. But there's a fellow in Western Canada named Bryce Fisher who used to show quite competitively, and he's decided there maybe the last couple of years that he wanted to get in. So I worked pretty close with Bryce, and I remember on the Sunday before Madison, my son Keaton called me, and he says, "I think Bryce Fisher's going to buy this cow." And I said, "No," I says, "he likes great cows, but I don't know if he's going to step in that deep." So by about Monday morning, the word was that Bryce had bought half of her. And anyways, we got to Madison, and it was kind of back and forth on who was going to strap the cow. And anyways, long story short, I got the privilege of leading Maple at Madison, and which was a great privilege. She does have a mind of her own. She maybe just doesn't like to get her head up and her ears up at times, but we got along pretty good. And then when the Royal came along, that's when she really put her dancing shoes on. She wanted to. I still remember in the championship, we were down at the far end, and I still remember Jan Jacobs coming towards us with his cow, and she's got a big front end, wide chest, open ribbed, and he walked by, and it was almost like a breath of fresh air. And I looked up, and she kind of looked at me, and that's the only time she ever put her ears up. We walked forward down the center of that ring at the Royal Winter Fair, and she never dropped her ears. And I just, you just hang on and pray and hope. And I thought, by jumpins, you really want this girl. So yeah, it was quite a thrill.
Oh, it gives me goosebumps to hear that. I mean, she really shone a spotlight, and particularly on the red and white breed as well. So what an incredible moment.
And that cow it takes an incredible cow to utter like, well, that was on I believe it was the Thursday, Friday's the show, and then again for the Supreme Champion. So red, white, black and white, and Supreme. And yeah, it was sure was a shock when we heard that she left us.
Now, Barclay, that's a good segue into a story I was going to sort of tell about showmanship, because, there's a lot of young people in this country, in Australia, that are showmanship mad. And, I know when I was growing up, I absolutely love showmanship. And there's so many young people that will be listening to the podcast. And I remember having a conversation with you at World Dairy Expo one year. I don't know if you remember this. It was probably after a few Canadian clubs, but you were leading a heifer at World Dairy Expo. You were in second place. And I'd never seen this happen before. As a young person from Australia, watching the show there in person, and you were staring the judge down. Your heifer had better legs than the heifer that was in first. And you looked at the judge, you looked at your heifer's legs, and you looked at the first place heifer, and she had terrible legs. And you kept sort of just repeating that. And what happened was the judge then put you first. And I just remember watching this, and I'll never forget it. And I was thinking, they don't teach you that, like that's showmanship. And that was something like truly magical to witness. And no one had ever taught me or showed me. And I think even now, like no one teaches that. So, obviously you've been on the strap of a cow like Maple, but, run me through that thought process. And obviously you've strapped some great cows. Maybe Maple obviously comes top to the mind, but tell me about how you had the passion for showmanship and strapping, and maybe some other great cows that you've had the privilege of leading as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's one of those things that you're kind of, you like trying to do, and you have admirations of. Maybe, back in the day, there was the Bert Stewarts, there was the Lowell Lindsays, and I know Hanover Hill, they used to come to our county show, and they used to bring all of them. Like they brought Charity, they brought Countess, they brought, and you'd see those leadsmen come in with their whites on. Lowell Lindsay, Mac Logan. Sorry if I'm missing a few. Bert Stewart, he used to come there and help Tedesco's. And our county show, when it was back in the day, there was Flatdale, Roybrook, Hanover Hill, Tedesco's, Elmcroft, and there was cows that would win there that would go on and win the Royal. And I think that just instills you as a young kid, seeing that, and all of a sudden, you got to have it. You got to have it in your blood. You got to have it in your passion as well. But I don't know. Some things are teachable, but some things aren't. Like I say, it's kind of instinct.
Yeah.
Thinking back on, some of the things that maybe I do in the ring, as you well said, I looked. Sometimes that's just, instinct taking over, and whether we even realize that we're doing that or not, or trying to convince yourself that, I should be first, or second. And, there's a happy medium there too, because, there's also the judges that you think that you're going to tell me what you're going to do, what I'm supposed to do. You might end up third too. So,
yeah. So Barclay, tell me, there's a cow, and I remember as a kid looking back and thinking it was a pretty cool story, a cow called Georgette. Can you tell us a little bit about the cow and maybe about that story as well?
Yeah, I believe it was in 2001. It was late September. I was just before Madison. I was out building a page wire fence, and I got a phone call from a fellow from Eastern Ontario, and he says, you see this outside 2-year-old? She's incredible. I said, when's she calved? They said February. I was like, February? This is friggin', end of September. So they really didn't think much about it. And then about 3 hours later, Patty Jones called me, the great photographer she is, and says, hey, seen a pretty cool cow. You should go look at her. So anyways, that night, I kind of thought, well, should I or shouldn't I? And if she's that good, why hasn't somebody else seen her? She's born in February. She's just out of being a junior 2-year-old. So anyways, I got up at 2:00 in the morning and headed for Eastern Ontario, and I got there about 5:30. And this cow come walking in the barnyard bawling, and I thought, if this is her, it's worth the drive. Anyways, long story short, we bought her at the Kentville Championship Show, and she went on to be, I believe, third place 3-year-old or 2-year-old at the Royal that year. And the next year, the following year, she was intermediate champion at the Royal for Naponi EDR and our syndicate that we had there. And she anchored our 2004 Premier Exhibitor at the Royal. And then we just decided that it was probably good to have a sale. Sometimes those good cows, they're worth more when they're, 4 or 5 years old. And we had some ducklings out of her, some calves. So we decided to sell her. And I still remember the day of the sale. You just never ever know. And I know that Ken Koymans and Bryce Fisher were there, and there was a couple other people interested. But when they're at like 450 and they're still bidding, one guy hangs the phone up and then gets back on the phone. It was pretty cool. So, and Georgette went on to breed very well, and we are still fortunate enough to have a few offspring out of that family that we're breeding from right now. So it was a cool ride, put it that way.
And you mentioned she bred really well. I mean, there is some descendants there that have done really well at the Royal. Maybe for yourself and for some partners. Maybe you mentioned Kevin Dobriner before. I'm not sure. Was it Kevin that had a descendant there that was? So about that.
In July of the sale, 2006, I went down 2 weeks later and I bought a Goldwyn sister to Georgette. Her name was Geography Goldwyn as a baby calf. Anyways, long story short, fast forward, I sent her to Oakfield Corners. Jonathan Lamb was great partnership. Alicia, great people. And they decided that we'd go in a partnership and we'll flush the cow and make some babies. 2000 and I forget what year it was, but it was at the Royal Winter Fair. She got on the bus and went to Oakfield Corners. Within 2 years to the day, OCD Doorman Georgette was junior champion at the Royal as a December calf, and then Bill Briner's bought her, and Lindsay and Bill Schillings bought her the next year, and she was junior champion again at the Royal the following year. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Barclay, moving to Australia, obviously we're here to chat all things International Dairy Week. You've judged shows all around the world, right throughout North America. How excited are you to finally come down under and judge our big show down here? Well,
I'm very excited. I couldn't believe, I thought Declan pocket dialed me there the other day. But anyways, I'm very excited. There's a lot of judges that have goals or admirations on what they want to do. Of course, here in North America, it's Royal Winter Fair or World Dairy Expo. And I've always wanted to judge Madison and the Royal. And unfortunately, I've been able to do that. And I've always wanted to come to Australia to judge your show, because that was one of my top 3 places to come. So when I finally got the call, I was over the moon. I was excited. I was excited to tell my family too. It was.
Now, Barclay, you have been to Australia before. Do you remember the year that was? And I guess what were your thoughts about the cattle back then? Because certainly things have evolved and changed. What year was that you came down?
I can't remember I really don't remember what year that was, Declan. Would I be saying 2003, 2004, somewhere around there? But I remember coming there, and there was one herd that had a heck of a herd of cows. Maybe Fraser's was their name. Yeah, they had some Stormatic daughters. They had like 3 or 4 Stormatic daughters, and they were really, really, really good cows, dairy. And you know what? Maybe a little more modern cows than we had here in North America at that time. But you guys have obviously imported some embryos and great genetics, and you guys are right on the same level as anybody around the world as far as your genetics are concerned now. I've been fortunate enough to sell a bull named Moran, and obviously that was came from your neck of the woods, and so I'm really looking forward to coming down. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I love judging internationally.
Well, Barclay, we can't wait to have you down under. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been so great to have a, check in on your background and obviously all the accolades and all the things you've achieved over the years. We absolutely cannot wait to have you judge our black and whites at our biggest show. Bit over 6 months' time. We'll see you then.
Okay, thanks, Darren.
This podcast is sponsored by Worldwide Sires Australia. Worldwide Sires Australia will celebrate its 10-year anniversary at IDW 2024 as a wholly owned business of the Worldwide Sires and Select Sires family, owned by farmers for farmers. They're excited to welcome fellow work colleague Barclay Phoenix to Australia again, this time to judge the prestigious Holstein Show. Its owners and farmers across America all have slightly different breeding goals, as do farmers across the globe and Australia. So the company understands and has always been at the forefront of creating the next generation of breed-changing sires for all those markets. The most important part of having a farmer-owned board is that board members also want cows in calf first before any genetic gain is realised, therefore semen fertility has always been a priority. For more information, please contact any of their local reps or check out their social media pages. Their website is wwsaustralia.com or email the office.